Thank you, Travis. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the LRAPA Board of Directors meeting. I'd like to open the meeting with roll call. Travis?
Sure, yeah, I will go through it as they appear on my screen. Joining us today is Chair Joe Piscineri, Vice Chair Janine Parisi, Board Member Matt Keating, Board Member Mike Fleck, Board Member Howard Saxon, Board Member Terry Fitzpatrick, Board Member Joe Burney, Steve Dietrich, Julie Lindsay, and myself are here for LRAPA staff. We also have other people joining us in attendees right now. LRAPA staff includes Cassandra Jackson, Colleen Wagstaff, Katie Eagleson, and Robbie Robinson. We have Jim Daniels, who is the chair for the Citizen Advisory Committee with us, Justin Overdevest with Good Company to provide a report to the board here in a little bit. Lydia, who is our minutes recorder, Mary Bridget Smith, who I will promote to panelist here as well in case she's needed. Paul Nielsen with Eisler, our auditor, to provide an update to the board as well. And that is all present currently.
Thank you, Travis. Appreciate that. So let's go ahead and get this thing started. Is there any, I think there were some adjustments to the agenda. Can someone describe those, please? I think that was sent out by email. Is that not correct? Yes, I misread it. I think Deb sent something out.
I don't know if it was an adjustment to the agenda. I think she was just indicating that there was new links added to some of the items.
Okay, so it wasn't an actual change, just link changes.
Yeah.
Okay, my apologies. I misunderstood that as an adjustment. Okay, when well, that's done, we'll go on to item number 3, public participation. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak that you know of, Travis?
I do not. We did have Peter Dragovich, who is also on our CAC. He joined as well. If anybody would like to speak as a member of the public, please raise your hand and I'll give you the ability to unmute so you can do so. And if nobody raises their hand, then I'll take that as nobody is interested in providing any comment today.
Okay. Thank you for checking. I appreciate that. So that moves us down to item 3C. Is there any board members that want to bring up anything that's unscheduled on the agenda that pertains to agenda items? Okay, seeing no one. Moving forward to action items number 4, the consent calendar. I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar as submitted.
Move approval.
Okay, I have a move to approve. Do I have a second?
This is Howard. I'll second.
Thank you, Howard. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. We go with a vote signifying by aye or a hand wave.
Aye.
Any opposed signify the same, please. Travis, you see anybody? I don't have everybody on my screen. Okay. Perfect. Passes unanimously. Moving on to item number 5 would be the financial audit report follow-up. Who's going to take that?
Let me, Paul, I'm going to promote you to panelist here so you can join and then unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you'd like. And you can give that presentation.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Well, you got an updated version of the financial statements, and you also, I believe, got a letter, which in our thing, if you read the letter, it says we found 2 material weaknesses we think we need to bring to the attention of the board. I don't know if everybody's received that, but it's here on the PowerPoint. So let me describe what happened. When we were doing the audit, the accounts, so there's accounts receivable software that tracks what people owe you. It's like a billing register, if everybody understands what I'm saying when I say, I'm talking too much like an accountant, somebody yell at me. It's like a billing register that tracks separately from what we call the general ledger, what's an accounts receivable. And those 2 numbers should match up, and they did not by quite a bit. it was a material amount in our world. So again, Julie did a lot of work to figure out what happened. And one of the things that had happened, for example, if you sold something to me, sell's not the best example, but it might help everybody understand. If I come in and buy something, but you say you can pay me later, the transaction would be to record a receivable and record a sales. But there have been cash transactions during the year posted to receivable in which that first leg of the transaction never happened. If I might have confused you with that, but basically they were posted in the wrong spot, which threw receivables way off. So cash receipts shouldn't go straight into receivables unless there's a entry in receivables before that time that it can offset. Any questions on that one?
Go ahead, Howard.
In my past experience, when there's been a deficiency identified in an audit, usually the management of the company responds as to how that will be prevented in the future. So has there been a response from staff on how that will be prevented in the future?
Can I address, we will actually need to include that in this letter. So later on, I think Julie will add some, or Julie and Steve will add some commentary. Because underneath each one of these, before we finalize it, we need management response and how that's going to be resolved, or how it already has been resolved. So.
Okay.
Right, but I can respond really quick. We have implemented some reporting and some balancing rules when we do the different processes for accounting. So for example, when we pay our payments, there's some balancing and reporting processes now in place that show they're still in balance. The same with receivables. When a deposit goes in, the accounts receivable is now balanced each time with the aging report. So in this audit, that's what was off. The aging report and the accounts receivable balance didn't balance. And so they are now balanced almost on a daily basis by our office manager, which is Colleen. And then I also do audits probably every Friday on those, both AP and the AR, to make sure they're in balance.
Good. Thank you, Julie. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Howard. That actually was my primary question. Now, is our board going to approve that? Because I know my nonprofit, we always have one significant deficiency, which is separation of duties, because we're a small agency. And so I actually have to have board approval to send to the county, who we contract with, that. Do we have any of those sorts of expectations with the state?
No, what the state requires is a management response. The state has no requirement of board approval on this, but this letter will go to the state when the audit report goes to the state.
So Paul, can you describe, I've seen some significant deficiencies. I've heard about material weaknesses. What are the different levels? Because this seems like a pretty egregious finding.
I will describe what the differences are. First of all, let me go back in history a little ways. We used to call them significant. I'll start with what was considered the lesser one. Significant deficiencies used to be called reportable conditions, which doesn't sound as bad, right? But the AICPA, who sets the audit standards, said you cannot use that language anymore. This has been about 10 years ago or more. And they said a significant deficiency is something, this puts some judgment on my part as an auditor. I feel the board needs to know, but it would not have a material effect on the financial statements. A material deficiency is something we found. Now, Julie corrected it, but since it came to us in a manner that it would have materially affected financial statements, I have to mention that. Now, if you go back far enough in my days as an auditor, because auditing's changed a lot. 20 plus years ago, this wouldn't even come up because we said, hey, you need to fix this. You give it back to us. We say, hey, now it's fixed. We're done. But the auditing standards have changed a lot now. But basically, if you give me something and I have to say, you need to correct this, and it's a dollar amount big enough that we consider it material, it's going to be a material deficiency.
Thank you for that, Paul. I would definitely like to have the letter. I mean, I'm not sure if the rest of the board cares or not, but I definitely would like to see it, you know, when it's finalized.
That's, well, hopefully that'll be real soon.
Okay, is that all you have, Mike? Okay, thank you. Any
So
other?
this-
Okay, go ahead, Paul.
I was gonna mention the second one, in accounts payable. When we test accounts payable, this is what we do as auditors. We go in, your year ends June 30. So if we're in there in September, usually we don't go much past September. If we're in there in August, we do August. We say, give us all your checks you ran from July 1, so after June 30, up till September 30. We pull a sample from that and say, okay, we think this should have been on the accounts payable listing, was it? And we had the same error here. When we started put that, and the error here was, shouldn't say same error, was we pulled a couple of items and said, we think this should be a payable, and they were not on the payable listing. So that's what happened there.
Okay, Howard.
Yeah, I had not a related question to the deficiencies, but substantial portion of LRAPA's budget, if you will, for this past year was the EPA grant. And I assume that I wasn't sure of the contractual relationship between LRAPA and Good Company. I assume that they're a contractor. And so one question I had, again, just from my previous experience of managing large subcontracts, especially on federal projects, is I know that I would assume that when Good Company submits an invoice, that they certify that it's true and accurate. I was curious, are they under a lump sum or a cost plus fixed fee type contract with LRAPA? And does Good Company have a cognizant federal audit agency that reviews their billing? And I guess the question is, since their expenditures are rolled into the audit report, I wanted to have some confidence that what they're billing on this federal contract with EPA is indeed accurate, and that Good Company is compliant with all the federal acquisition rules and billing practices. So could you, Paul, comment on that at all?
Well, we tested invoices that went in. I'd have to get in the file to see what individual invoices got tested. I imagine if Good Company is a big portion of it, we tested it because it's based on sampling techniques. If you spend a lot of money in one company, we're going to test it. Now, as far as we test it, we put it up against the standards the federal government has and say if we think it's allowed or not allowed. We didn't find any unallowed costs, so that's the good answer there. As far as Good Company having a cognizant federal agency, the Single Audit Act applies mostly to not-for-profits and governments. There's some exceptions, and that's the audit that law that rules whether you need a federal audit. There's some exceptions for for-profits. So I really don't, without really looking at Good Company, I wouldn't know if they're subject to the Single Audit Act. If they're a for-profit, that would be subject to, or they're not-for-profit and then get enough federal money. But if you're just looking at the money you pass through to them, they're considered a vendor and not what we call a subrecipient. If they're considered a subrecipient, then they might be subject from the money you pass through, but they're considered a vendor. So the federal attachment ends once you write. They don't have to do that kind of reporting.
Well, I'm still kind of curious about that. I mean, I know that they're a for-profit corporation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what kind of corporation, but they are providing professional services. And since we're going to be signing off as a board on the audit report, I just want to have some confidence that what they're billing is compliant with federal acquisition rules, which would apply in this case since it's EPA money. And so that's really my question. I don't have any doubts about it. I just want to have confidence that what they're billing, LRAPA, is in compliance with the FARs, federal acquisition rules.
Yeah, we do test that when we look at the single audit, do the single audit testing. We test whether they're in compliance with the federal acquisition rules.
Julie,
As far as
Julie, you have a
looking,
question?
Well, I just wanted to add that we did go through a little stronger audit with Paul's group this year for TAG. We provided contracts, we provided the invoices, and also TAG was EPA audited last spring, right before I got here. So we are being audited on that grant.
Okay, thank you.
And TAG was the federal program we selected. You had, if you look at the back report, you have a schedule of federal expenditures. It lists 3 federal programs. TAG was the one we selected for auditing. So, and there's a, I'll just tell you, there's a process to determine what we select, and I could talk a lot about that, but most of you'd probably fall asleep by I got through all that. So there's a process that we go through to determine what federal grant gets selected.
I fall asleep before you even got there. Sorry.
I believe it. That's the effect auditors have on people, you know?
Well, I manage large federal contracts, and so I've been through the ringer with the Defense Contract Audit Agency. So I have some skin that I lost in that process. So that's why I was asking the questions.
I was doing this, I probably mentioned that last time, I can't remember. I was an auditor back in '83 when the Single Audit Act actually first got passed, way back when, and it was totally different rules back then than we have now.
Thank you, Paul. Does any directors have any questions? Any additional questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. Appreciate your report very much, very much. And I don't believe this is an action item at this point. So next item will be, thank you. Next item will be the status report for the Oak Ridge Air Project.
Good afternoon, you all. This is Justin Overdevast with Good Company and Oak Ridge Air. You're used to seeing Josh Proudfoot, but he's on vacation this week, so I'm filling in. And this is one of the primary projects I manage, so happy to take questions throughout or at the end of the report. And Howard, I can answer your question as we dig into some audit related items here too at the front end. So just a few updates on staffing. So we've got a couple of new staff members joining our team. One is the outreach coordinator, and this is funded through the second wave of the targeted airshed grant funding. So this is really dedicated to helping kind of get boots on the ground and the word out and kind of consolidate our communication strategies throughout kind of all project components of TAG. And then Grace Kaplowitz, who's been serving through the RARE program through the University of Oregon. She's been doing a 2-year AmeriCorps program, serving in half capacity with City of Oak Ridge and half with Oak Ridge Air. She's joining our Good Company team. So she'll be staying on capacity, so keep supporting Oak Ridge Air. And then we just attended EPA meeting this past couple of weeks, and they mentioned that Oak Ridge is actually going to be on the docket again, potential community to receive again targeted airshed grant funding. That release hasn't happened yet. It probably happen in the next month or two, but something to just have on your horizon there, radar. And we've had a series of calls over the last few months talking to EPA, in some part related to auditing. We were spending quite a bit of time on the heating upgrades portion of our auditing procedure, and overdoing it in some ways. And so we had their contract manager on board and basically talked through our process and what needed to happen. And so we basically streamlined that to meet their requirements. And Howard, to your question about FAR, I know Josh has been leading that effort over the past year. With us, we've got some other federal contracting work that we do, and one is triggered kind of state of Washington and some of the federal dollars that are connected to that. So I'll have him follow up with you on the specifics of the FAR auditing component.
If I may, Chair.
Go ahead.
Because Justin mentioned we could ask questions at any time.
Let's do it.
Justin, what does "you got carried away with overheating" mean? Or that didn't sound too technical to me, and I didn't understand what you were referring to.
Yeah, so our staff, the heating upgrades coordinator we basically have 3 buckets, right? The 3 primary interventions: certified wood stoves, ductless heat pumps, and weatherization. And due to the kind of limitations on the caps for each of those, particularly wood stoves, there's some work that gets done that gets attributed to weatherization, for example. Like we put in a new chimney and there's not dollars to, that fit that cap based on the cost of the wood stove, then we attribute it to weatherization. But there's a lot of, as you might have got, a contractor has series of sub costs that are part of an invoice, right? And so we were attributing some of these sub costs rather than rolling them up more efficiently. And so that was part of what we connected with EPA on.
I'm sorry, does that mean we just got through an audit report. Does that mean you entered things a little carelessly, or what does that mean?
No, we were spending multiple hours per house to document some of these things, and we were doing so in such a laborious way that EPA wasn't even tracking. So we were able to go through kind of house by house examples of how we were tracking and kind of get to a point of what made the most sense in terms of our
Thank you.
our amount of time. And if they're not even going to check, I mean, we're keeping really good records. Our housing, our residential upgrade coordinator has meticulous information. It's all embedded in an Excel tracking sheet, and it flows into our EPA quarterly reporting, which is super helpful too.
Thank you.
One other item to note on weatherization dollars. So this came up early, multiple years ago when we started to kind of engage on this front, but Homes for Good, Land Electric identified mobile and manufactured homes where we come in and basically the cost of the intervention, the weatherization or the ductless heat pump, the value of the dollars that we'd put into that home was worth more than the dwelling itself, just because it was so dilapidated or what might constitute not really doing that work. And so we've been able to gain confirmation from EPA that we can use those weatherization dollars to contribute to a new home. And so St. Vincent de Paul does quite a bit of work up in Oak Ridge, and two mobile home parks right now. So we could basically pool our funds, and Land Electric has some BPA funding that could also kind of attach to this. So these are the kind of the behind the scenes components we're trying to move. And then we did get a thumbs up from EPA in terms of utilizing an incentive if we were, I know Josh has presented before, and some of the challenges with supply chain and labor, they're particularly challenging in the weatherization sector. And so we're currently evaluating whether or not to use an incentive. So that's something that we may choose to see if we can expedite some of these projects. And then finally, upgrading stoves that are 15 years old. So 20 years is the mark that we use in terms of certified versus uncertified. And knowing that the tail of this program is going out 7 years in total, we know we'll hit that 20-year mark. And so if we come across a stove that's 15 years or older, we can exchange it now rather than having to wait later in the process. And then kind of going down here, I know Josh has shared kind of these output values. We're going to, I think, report out in this format over kind of each quarter and kind of show kind of overall interest in the program, and then where we're at progress wise with change outs. It is worth noting that there wasn't a red day this past winter heating season, and some of that is climate related as much as active action on the ground with some of these program efforts. Janine, I see your hand up.
Hey,
Go ahead,
thank
Janine.
you.
Yep.
First, I just really appreciate the conversation with EPA and getting some clarification that you don't need to invest in a dilapidated manufactured home if there's a way to pool funds and get people into safer, more comfortable housing. that's an incredible win, and what a benefit to the residents up there. So I really applaud those efforts and pooling dollars and getting clarification. You can do that. I'd love to see the metrics on that and to see, how many success stories you can gather out of that process. I wish you the best of luck there. That's just, talk about going above and beyond the original, like what we thought we could accomplish with these grants. Finding people just new housing in general, that is, it's really impressive work. So thank you so much. My easy, quick question is, wood stove opt-out, are those people who chose to have a wood stove removed and are not replacing it and are just going with all electric heat, or what does that mean?
That is correct. Yeah, those residents are deciding to opt out completely, which was a little bit of a surprise given we want to give people the option of a backup heat source, due to winter storm or power outages. And on that mobile home manufactured front, I do see a lot more work kind of in the background and connected to other communities. We met with NOAA's executive director recently, and there's state funding coming through Oregon Community and Housing Services, and there's just a lot more emphasis being placed on this just based on need. And then one of the curiosities kind of connected to some of our other work on climate action is mobile homes oftentimes are larger per capita or per square foot in terms of their relative cost of electricity utility bills, but also their greenhouse gas emissions. And so, and oftentimes they're not comfortable, right? The building envelope is not tight. And so they're paying more, they're not comfortable, and it's kind of a health issue as well. So we're hoping to kind of help push on those places where we can. And then finally, kind of the chimney sweep vouchers program. This is part of the TAG 2.0 second round of funding. We've got a lot more marketing and kind of smaller strategy type activities. And so we've got moisture meters as part of that program, but starting in the fall, we're going to do these chimney sweep vouchers to get people's chimneys cleaned out and burning cleaner. And then moving forward, the community firewood program stocking up for next year. It's kind of a year-round process in terms of, getting the wood ready to go and seasoned, and then starting to sell come the fall. And we've been working more LRAPA and Oak Ridge Air in terms of engaging the police department and kind of getting better tracking from their staff on some of the education kind of knock visits. They're going through quite a bit of transition in terms of their leadership, and the police force is down, I think, to just one, if not two people. And so there's some transition going on there, but we're hoping to build into that program some more refinement on the diversion program in particular come the fall.
Justin, just as a note, you might as well plan on continued transition with that agency. It's been like that for about 35 years.
Yeah, we've
Just so
definitely experienced some of that over the last 6 or 7. Yes,
right.
It has been a lot of transition.
Yep.
So moving into education and outreach, Woodshed program has been successful. We're looking at that second part of the TAG program to fund over 100 woodsheds, a lot of interest. This is dovetailing too with the Firewise program. So a lot of community members have their firewood very close to their home, which is extreme fire risk. And so some of the work through our partner, the collaborative, and doing these house visits, site visits, being able to kind of identify opportunities for community members that are in need on this front. And then again, part of the second phase of the funding, we've got some research dollars allocated to the University of Oregon and Oregon State universities. They've contributed some seed funding. So U of O has been doing a series of interviews with Grace Kaplowitz, whom I mentioned earlier. They've done, I think, 22 interviews with the community and kind of getting a sense of what their level of understanding on Oak Ridge Air, the air quality issues, and kind of how to incorporate some of these different program strategies a little bit more effectively. So looking at incorporating some of that into our program over the course of this year. And then we've had some events in the recent past, tree planting. We had a semi-annual meeting. And then tonight there's a wildfire safety night. So bringing together Oregon Department of Forestry, Forest Service, a number of other partners on the ground. The collaborative is hosting that effort. Oak Ridge Air and Watershed Council will be there tonight, as well as LRAPA to support that effort. And then one of the components that's not direct to Oak Ridge Air in terms of funding necessarily, but since the collaborative is the residential heating upgrade coordinator, and we have so many of the elements related to seasonality of taking on Firewise, they've been very active on fuels reduction. And so this past few months, they've been able to treat about 165 acres of land just adjacent to town. So reducing fire risk from that northern side of town, which is substantial. ODF just put out fire risk maps this week, and Oak Ridge is surrounded by extreme fire risk, which is not surprising given it's surrounded by national forest. One of the pieces that is funded through the Oak Ridge Air program is this yard debris pickups and yard waste program. And so we're seeing the ability to reduce kind of outdoor burning, but also utilize some of this material more effectively in the community too. And then one of the pieces tonight at the Wildfire Safety Night, we're going to be giving out replacement air filters. So we've got over 500 air purifiers in the community now. And there's each year we give out basically an updated or a new filter for replacement. That's all I've got.
Excellent. Looks like Matt, you got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Justin, thanks for the report. What's the ratio of renters to homeowners that you're dealing with in regards to the audits or distribution of air purifiers?
So air purifiers, we're not tracking renters versus owners as much on that front. We are, with respect to kind of generally within the community, there's a pretty high proportion of renters. I think it's over 50%, if I'm getting that right. There's a currently there's a housing consulting project that's going on in the community to kind of ascertain some more details on that. I would say manufactured housing and mobile homes make up over 40% of the housing stock in the community, which is much higher than a lot of others.
And what sort of roadblocks are you finding, if any, when you're interacting with or encouraging renters who clearly, obviously don't own their property to take appropriate steps to transition appropriately for their family's health? Is that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, what's amazing is that this program funding through EPA actually serves renters. A lot of other programs that do this type of heating upgrade work only serve owners. And so it makes it a little bit easier. There's some elements in there of getting to the landlord or the owner. That's one extra hurdle in the process, but we're seeing engagement on that front. And we're trying to kind of, this is part of why we're bringing on the outreach coordinator too, is really being able to target certain parts of the community. Now that we kind of on that mobile home park have a little bit more guidance from EPA, we can engage those folks a little bit more effectively in terms of knowing, what we can do.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Any further questions from the board? Seeing none, we're moving on to the next item. Thank you. Item number 7, a report from the advisory committee.
Okay, I'm getting Jim Daniels here promoted to panelist. Jim, you should be able to hit the OK button and join us.
Okay, hello.
Hello, Jim.
Okay, so we met in June and our main topic was the survey of the regulated community that in a previous board meeting you asked us to start back up again. So we've been discussing that and how to improve the questions. And as part of that discussion, there came to be an interest in expanding the survey to have one branch off of the Survey Monkey that would be more about the community and giving people who visit the website an opportunity to be polled. So that would be one survey with two different tracks, depending if you had a permit or if you were a member of the public. So since that's a little beyond what we were first assigned, I'm reporting back to request that for permission to expand it in that way. So I don't know if you want to address that now or if I should move on.
Go ahead and complete your report. And if we have any questions, we'll, oh, wait a second. I got a hand up from Janine.
I guess I have a separate question for the rest of the board members. I read the minutes, Jim, and just for other board members, the original request was, hey, we've had this survey of permittees. We stopped doing it for a number of years. It provided some valuable feedback about the performance of the organization that fed into our director's evaluation. It'd be nice to have that data for the next director's evaluation. It also provided some trend data. So, you know, you could look over time because the survey hadn't changed very much. And I'm asking the rest of the board members, to what extent does keeping some of the same questions very similar or identical for that trend data important to you, or do you not care, and should the Citizen Advisory Committee kind of start new and fresh with building questions that they think are most relevant for today's market? And I'm only asking because I know when we do survey work at eWeb, we try very hard to keep kind of a core group of questions the same so we can monitor trends over time. I don't have strong feelings about this, but just to help with some direction, because I feel like there's a lot of kind of survey design going on in the Citizen Advisory Committee. You know, designing surveys there's a skill set to that, right? It's not something that just anybody should be doing. You know, you can ask questions a certain way that lead people to a certain response. So I'm just want us to be thoughtful, and I don't want to waste the committee's time. So I'm asking the rest of the board members, how important is it to kind of stick with a formula and keep it forward, or just, you know, hey, come up with whatever you think makes the most sense and we'll take a look at it in the future.
Thank you, Janine. Actually, I'll throw in my input right now as a good opportunity, is that I think that if we are that curious as to how we're doing and how people perceive our work and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, how the director's doing, then we go ahead and bite the bullet and pay for a legit professional survey instead of trying to construct it from within and still run that risk of not maybe asking not getting there where we really want to get there by accident. I just think it's just worth an investment of a professional survey. Go ahead, Mike.
I don't know. We had them do it for years on our, you know, I wouldn't want to spend the money personally. I mean, I think there's value, Janina, what you're saying about keeping the questions the same. I hadn't really thought about it until that way. What I was looking at is, did we want to expand, you know, a more narrow set of questions to the general public, which I was given the thumbs up for, because I think, you know, input's always valuable. I mean, you know, but you're right. As far as our permittees, I think that actually makes sense to me, as keeping those questions similar, so that we can get a look at trends. Then again, if we're missing something, is there an opportunity? I guess without looking at them, you know, and you know, evaluating that, I'm not sure where to go. But I certainly agree there is value in that.
Matt?
Thanks, Chair. I would submit, Janine, that both approaches have value. And so a hybrid is what I would welcome. That way you can see the trend data while also recognizing that the landscape and times change, and allowing for some thoughtful input from the advisory committee to help shape questions as the landscape and times change. So I would put myself in the hybrid both camp.
Thank you, Matt. Mr. Burney, Commissioner Burney, may I help you?
May you help me? No, I'm addressing this to the whole board. Like Matt, I'm also driving a hybrid Camry. But my question is this, and it may be me, I apologize. Have we seen the damn questions we're talking about?
Well, you have in the past, depending how long you've been on the board. But the point's taken. I think I could go back with an eye towards allowing for trend data, but propose some questions that either be modified or removed that weren't very useful in that regard, or times have changed.
Thank you, Jim. I'm thinking maybe you could if you don't mind, have them resent to board members so we could look at them
Okay,
and maybe provide you some input.
sure.
I definitely agree with that, Joe. And maybe what I was also meaning is not necessarily paying for a full-blown survey by a professional outfit, Mike. I guess maybe halfway there is having somebody that does this professionally, that knows what they're doing, exactly like Janine was saying, to review those questions before they get blasted out there. That's all. Just some sort of sieve process. And again, of course, we could be part of that, but I don't know if we're all professional surveyors. Janine maybe, but
No, not at all. I'm not. And I just really was trying to give Jim some sideboards to help so
Sure.
that you guys aren't just, kind of spinning your wheels. So I think what I've heard, and I really appreciate the board's feedback on this, is that there's probably a core set of questions we should try to keep somewhat similar. And then you guys take your leeway to add and adapt some additional questions for the permittees. Then the second question that you asked is how much are we interested in surveying the general public? I think there's always an opportunity for input as people, look on the website or interface with eWeb and provide input. Obviously, that's going to be a very small subset of people who are already, kind of self-selecting to work with the LRAPA, but also take the survey. So you're probably going to, I think there's going to be some inherent bias there. That's okay. I think, what somebody said, all input's good input. So I don't have any problem with that. I just don't think that's the primary. I wouldn't want that to hold up this other work. So that's all. That's the only thing that I would say there. And to Joe's point, if we want to do a broader community survey, I would say that's where we might want to spend the money and have some assistance so that we have the right set of questions that we'd send out to the whole community versus what I think the Citizen Advisory Committee is focused on is how do we take the pulse of people who are interfacing with the utility as members of the public? And as I said, I think that we should always take the opportunity to gain whatever kind of feedback we can. So thank you for that, Jim.
Okay, well, and that's helpful. I might say part of what our thinking was that with the redesign of the website, it seemed like a good time to add a branch for public comment as far as that goes, but we could certainly do it in phases where we just focus on the permit holders for a start, and then we could turn to the public side later.
okay, great.
So moving on then, our July meeting is after discussion with LRAPA staff, there's a need to have a public outreach or public comment opportunity with regard to Purple Air in West Eugene, which was a part of that EPA resolution. I'm probably mangling this, Travis, so feel free to correct me, but there's a need to get that taken care of now. And so we were thinking we'd get that done in July, and then traditionally we don't meet in August, so we would be taking up the survey again in September. And that covers it.
Okay. Well, excellent, Jim. I appreciate your report, and hopefully you got some information feedback to where you can cruise forward.
Yes, that's helpful. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Next item will be number 8, the director's report of agency activities in the month of June 2022.
Yes, thank you, board members, Chair Joe. It's been a while since we've done a director's report. So thanks, Travis. You can kind of follow along here. So we've had some good air quality days, especially in June and some previous months with all the data showing good air quality index, which is wonderful from from an LRAPA perspective and certainly from a citizen perspective. So moving on to complaints. Complaints total 73 for the month of June, with the outdoor burning category having the most at 38, followed by industry at 23. And then you see the table at the bottom there, to date so far, 373 for the calendar year 22. Any questions there? I move on to enforcement.
Yeah, I got a question, Steve.
Okay.
If you could scroll back up to the top, one more page, please. I see Eugene, Springfield, Oak Ridge, Cottage Grove, max AQI. We have monitoring stations in right now in West Eugene and Alton Baker, or excuse me, West Eugene, Amazon Park, and Springfield, correct? And I asked that because I see the site Eugene and Springfield, and I wonder why they're lumped together when there's at least at this point, before that air monitoring piece moves to Oak Ridge, why those two sites are combined.
I'm going to ask for help either from Travis or from Lance, who is probably more familiar with location than I am.
I just gave Lance the opportunity to talk. Lance, if you want to give that, or I kind of have an answer to if you'd like me to.
Sure. Yeah, the AQI, those 3 points you have there for Eugene and Springfield, those sites you mentioned, Counselor, that takes the high of those sites, and so we just post the highest AQI or highest level out of all those 3 sites. Typically, Springfield is the lowest, and our Amazon and Highway 99 area sites are real similar. I mean, it is possible to tease those out, but just for simple purposes, we've kind of combined them and just picked the high site.
Okay. Thanks. And Travis, is there anything missing there that you want to add to that?
No, I was just going to add that our sites is West Eugene off Highway 99 in Elmira, and then the other site is at Amazon Park as opposed to Alton Baker.
Yeah, I corrected myself. My apologies. Thanks for catching that. And I want to pin that though, because I do want to discuss that memo that was the press release when we get to new business, if I could.
Okay. So with that, I'll move on to the enforcement, and at the table there, you see that there's a total of 8 enforcement actions, 2 new, 2 needing follow-up action from previous activity, 3 pending and 1 closed, and I can go into more detail on the next page. For the new category, you see there's forest paint, which is in Eugene. It's one of our ACDP, standard ACDP permits. And basically they've failed to operate and maintain the air containment collection unit, their biofilter, in a manner that minimizes air contaminant discharges. So where that sits right now is a notice of noncompliance was issued in June on the 22nd, and then they recently submitted a biweekly status report on June 30th, which we've received. And so that action is still being reviewed, and that's why it's still pending. The next one there on the new is Daniel Basaraba, and the violation to obtain an asbestos survey. This was located in Cresswell. Failure to get an asbestos survey prior to doing demolition activity. That notice of noncompliance was issued on the 24th of June. It's also still pending. And then moving on to previous activities, previous enforcement actions. Kingsford Manufacturing Company is in Springfield. It's one of our Title V facilities. Just so you know, because of the opacity violation for a major source, we have already conferred with EPA, and it's not considered in this case to be a high priority violator. So it's not on the list with EPA, but we are addressing it at our level as is appropriate. The initial notice of noncompliance was issued back in March. And then the subsequent action of a notice of noncompliance with civil penalty was issued towards the end of June, and we're expecting closure soon, so that it would be taken off the list of pending. But has not happened yet. The work's been completed, and we've worked with the facility to get to the endpoint. The next one there, FPG Oregon, which is the crematory in Eugene. They failed to maintain continuous monitoring of their afterburner temperatures. And so we are now at the step of a non-compliance civil penalty that was issued back in April, and that has since been paid. So this case is actually closed, and the activities that they put in place to prevent that from happening meets LRAPA's requirements going forward. And then the next one on the list here, Chris Johnson and Julie Renfro in Cottage Grove. This is an outdoor burning violation. And this one started out as a notice of non-compliance, and now it's got a notice of non-compliance with civil penalty. Unfortunately, it was returned. And so we have to reissue that certified mail so that it gets to the proper person in the right location so that we can proceed beyond pending. And then the next one on the list for continuing activity is the Ministry Construction, which is an asbestos survey that was not done before the asbestos and inspection was done before the renovation actually occurred. And so where that one is now is a notice of non-compliance and civil penalty was issued back on June 1st. And so we're still in the pending, and depending on how quickly the responsible party responds, we either put us in the mode of closure or going to the next step of enforcement, which would be elevating it to a court proceeding. Okay, the next one here is another Daniel Basaraba. It's also in that Crestwell location. This one was failure to attend outdoor burning until extinguished, and notice of non-compliance was issued here and followed up by a notice of non-compliance with civil penalty back on June 15th. This one has a special little case going with it, activities that we've had to seek outside counsel because of the person involved. And it's still pending because the responsible party is claiming that LRAPA did not follow all of its procedures when it comes to entering the property. So we've had to seek outside counsel to proceed on this one. But we've gotten the green light recently, and therefore we're going to be moving along with what we've done there on the notice of non-compliance with civil penalty. And then that's all I can say about that one. And then actions with no subsequent action since June 1st, but they were issued prior to June 1st, is Oregon Industrial Lumber Products in Springfield, violation of they continue to operate their wood-fired boiler in such a manner that sometimes causes deposition of ash on the neighboring neighbors. This one's been an ongoing issue that we've been working with the facility. They've been overcoming not only supply issues, but also contractors to do the work. But I think we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel because the plant was shut down. The operation was shut down on July 1st, so they could do this work that needed to be done. And I believe they're in the process of installing the multi-cyclone that needs to be replaced or put in place. And then as soon as that is done, it should take care of the fallout that is occurring downwind of the facility. And it's still pending until this work is completed. And that's all of the individual cases. You'll see there the list of cases so far. We're at non-compliance warnings at 12, and then civil penalties at 12 for the calendar year. And then moving on to the asbestos. There were no open burning letter permits issued in June. There were quite a few issued in May, but not in June. So in asbestos, we are at 60 for the year for the number of inspections that have been performed, which puts us at a roughly 25% inspection rate, and our goal has been 15. So we're exceeding that rate. On the permitting side of the house, you'll see here that we've got 36 total actions so far, 31 in the ACDP, 5 in Title V. Our current backlog of Title V permits is at 8. There are 3 currently to address that backlog on notice right now. There's 2 more scheduled for public notice in the very near future. And then there's 3 more on the list to possibly get advertised before the end of the calendar year. So we're addressing the backlog pretty well right now. We're on schedule. And Travis, I'll pause there because Travis is going to talk about the public engagement side of the house.
Yeah, June was a busy month in preparing for wood or fires, smoke from wildfires. We were coordinated with the Lane County Fire Defense Board and the Oregon Fire Forestry on the closure of outdoor burning in June 15th. We did receive some calls from some people frustrated by that June 15th closure, considering the very wet spring that we had. Kind of complaints ranged from it was wet and raining every weekend and there was no opportunity to do the burn. And now the season's closing and was frustration with that. But it was closed on June 15th because that is how it is written into our rules. Also, that took place in June was Smoke Ready Week, where LRAPA got with other like government entities throughout the Pacific Northwest talking about air quality to put out a lot of information about smoke resources, where to find air quality, how to be updated on wildfires, their size and so on and so forth. And then there's a wildfire safety night that was supposed to take place in early June, but that got rained out. It has been rescheduled for this evening. So after the board meeting, I'll be heading up to Oak Ridge to participate in that. On a public outreach effort, we continue to work with the core team who's interested on J.H. Baxter and the cleanup process that DEQ has undergoing around J.H. Baxter and residential properties. There was a meeting in June with the core team. The active Bethel community has been putting on Bethel Summer Fun events, as they've been calling them, throughout June and July. LRAPA participated at one of those events in June. We had an informational booth there to interface and talk with people who had questions from air quality or just get to know the community more. Also participated at one of those events in early July. Our webpage continues to be going through the redesign process. Optimistic that come the end of August, early September, we will be transitioning over to that.
Travis, let's get a couple questions answered real quick.
Oh, yes, I apologize.
Janine, go ahead. You're first.
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button. Just earlier in the presentation, there was a number of complaints assigned to J.H. Baxter in June for odor, and I was just kind of curious why there would be odor complaints at the facility. Do you have any insights into that?
Yeah, I can provide a little bit of some insight into that. So we have made it clear in conversations with the core team and people in West Eugene in general that we do not anticipate any odor to be coming from J.H. Baxter because they're not using the retorts in any way, shape, or form as LRAPA has decided. However, we continue to get people in the community who complain about odors from the facility, and sometimes they're not necessarily coming from J.H. Baxter. They could be coming from another facility, but they still log it as a J.H. Baxter complaint when they file it. And we do act very responsively to odor complaints on J.H. Baxter because, again, we don't anticipate there to be any offsite odor from the facility. So if someone is reporting or claiming that they are smelling J.H. Baxter, we respond and go to do an odor survey of that location to see if our compliance officers can smell the odor as well, and then potentially make a site visit to J.H. Baxter to assure that the retorts are not being used.
Thank you, Travis. Mike.
Yeah, so one of my good friends was one of those folks who had told me he was one of the ones who called you, Travis. So I'm going to just apologize right up front on that one. So I guess as far as what would it take for us to change that? Because I know Fire Defense Board often will shut down early when fire dictates it, but it does seem in those rare occasions where we have a wet spring where folks need, especially out where he's at in the rural areas, to be able to burn some of his piles, when it's actually dry enough to do so. which I think actually is good for air quality. I mean, wet stuff's gonna, smoke more anyway. So would it be changing the date? Would it be letting the Fire Defense Board actually set that every year? Or what would be the process to change that?
Well, I can start and Steve can fill in after me, but so that would require a change to our rules because it is written specifically as June 15th. What's special about June 15th? I think that's kind of leading into summer and anticipating that it is drying out. So that's why it's written. I don't think there's anything more to it other than that ambiguous date of June 15th. So that would require a change to our rules. I think there's ways that that could be considered to where the season goes until the Fire Defense Board decides to close the season from a fire concern. And that would require a rulemaking process. We do also to collectively on the other side to receive complaints from people who are impacted by outdoor burns. So there is that balance that's trying to set there, but it would require a change to our current rules.
Okay, and that's just Title 47 then?
I believe just that one, yeah.
Steve, go ahead.
Chair Joe, members of the board, that's exactly right. I won't say it's an obstacle, but it's easier said than done just to extend the date because it's in rule.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would love to see this added to an agenda in the future if we could.
Yeah, and Mike, actually, I have it, I'll show you. I got it written right there in regards to, okay, if we make the rules, we can change the rules and we can make conditions of the rules. And I would definitely would like to see, unless there's an objection with the majority of the board, would like to see where we can place that as far as your basic stat date of June 15th. And with the asterisk, unless changed or exempted by the board rule, by the board, allow the board to look at and say, okay, this year is really wet. Do we as a board agree we should change that date to push it back to July 10th or whatever date we pick? And that would just, seems like that would just eliminate that and allow us to look at it on an annual basis, to be fair to everybody. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, well, I'm not going to be one of the members of the board that objects to that. I was just going to try and cloak it with a little flesh and say, I think it would be good for staff to develop some conditional kinds of triggers for us to consider in changing that rule and being flexible.
Right. No, and that's exactly the correct approach, I would think, to just look at, okay, this is all completely objective materials that we're looking at, and we can objectively make a decision based on what we see before us, so we have an informed decision. I think that would be fair for everybody. So yeah, that'd be great. I don't think that takes a vote, but I see head nods. We have a consensus with looking at that. Coming back to the board. Okay. Excellent. Steve, any question? Travis? Oh, go ahead, Janine.
I'm fine with looking at it. I'm just gonna raise some angst about the board making decisions about when it's safe to burn or not safe to burn. I don't want to be on record when someone's backyard burn gets out of control in July and lights a neighborhood on fire. So I'm fine looking at it, but I have some anxiety about that. I think there's some risk and we should be really thoughtful.
Yeah, and I agree. I see your angle from that, Janine, and I think too that the board can ask based on a professional recommendation from staff, and not just say, hey, I think we should do this, but I think it should come from staff as a recommendation, as opposed to, hey, here's all these things. What do you guys want to do? That approach, does that make sense? That happens a lot with city business too. So, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry not to beat a dead horse. I appreciate the government 18 layers of filter between risk and liability. But I think you allay that by simply identifying where the recommendation comes from and what the board would like to consider in that. And of course, you get a professional recommendation, and we need to articulate all of that in process. That's all.
Yep. Awesome. All right, Travis, go ahead and finish up your report, please. We can move on. Got some stuff to cover still.
Sure, yeah. The last little bits I had here to report was essentially some of the media interest we had. Seneca Sustainable Energy is going through a permit renewal process, so we had some interest from that. Also had a media call about pollen counts. Interesting on that, after the person or the company that does pollen counts for Eugene, the woman who works there, is retiring, and she doesn't know if anybody will take up the torch behind her. So Eugene may lose our pollen count to people who are doing that. And we had one homewood heating complaint for June in 2022. And then Steve, I don't know if you want to go over upcoming and LRAPA board agenda items, but this last one on the list.
Thank you, Travis. I just wanted to point out, obviously, there's no August meeting scheduled next month. And then September takes us to the local, discuss local dues requests to our partners for their fiscal 2024 planning. Julie and I are trying to get a meeting scheduled possibly in August to meet with our partners ahead of that meeting so they can know what's at stake. And then I'll just pause there because I think that's the end of the director's report.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions? Oh, I got Matt. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Travis, can you expand on the retirement or the pending retirement of the person who does the Eugene pollen count? Is that a City of Eugene employee? Who's that person employed by? I'd like to learn more, and I think that would be a real shame to the community if that hole is not filled.
Yeah, so when it comes to pollen counting, that's not something that in the United States the government monitors for. So it's done commercially through commercial entities, and I forget the name of them, but the Allergy Associates of Eugene, I think is what is something similar to that. They're an allergy lab in Eugene who will administer allergy remedies to people, and they have been historically counting allergy or the pollen count in Eugene for a number of years. It's something that they choose to do, and it's one woman at the office who takes on that work and does that. And I'm told that she will be retiring in this year, and it's unclear if anybody at the office is willing to take on the workload that she had to run that pollen count. So if nobody does, then that won't be taking place in Eugene, which would be it is a resource that's available locally that could potentially be lost, but it is commercially handled and not something that's government involved.
Thank you, Travis. Any further questions for Travis before we move on to the next item? All right, looks good. Thank you very much for the report, Steve and Travis. Next item is going to be the item number 9, which would be the results of the director's performance evaluation and merit review. And who wants to take that from here? I think, is that Julie? Mary Bridget, who should we go ahead and initiate the conversation with, or should we just go ahead and dive into it on our own?
I think you can go ahead and start, Chair Pishinari.
Okay, sounds good. Of course, you would say that, and I'm not going to look through my paperwork. There it is. Okay, so last meeting, which I was unable to attend, but I did go back and look at it. The board of directors spoke about his performance, and then now we're on to his compensation package and what to do from here. It's not an executive meeting topic. It must be discussed in the public, and I believe everybody got a copy of the current compensation package with comparables or what options we have in front of us. So I'd entertain any discussion from any member that would like to place that or put that forward, their ideas. Janine, go ahead, please.
Hey, thank you, Chair Joe. I thought we had a really great discussion last month in our executive discussion, and really appreciated the candid conversation we had with Director Dietrich. I think, it's safe to say that we were all feeling very confident in the progress that the agency is making. Even today with the audit report, I think we're doing our jobs, right? That's the whole purpose of an audit, is to catch deficiencies if there are any, and then repair them. And I think, we're putting systems in place that are going to help catch that and prevent those measures in the future. And on behalf of the board, I just thought it was a very good conversation. I felt like we were very comfortable and confident in the path moving forward with the director and Julie at the helm. With that, I would like to make a motion as it pertains to a merit increase. The director, when he took the position, was hired in a in-between step. So he's in an awkward place where he's not really fitting in a normal step process. So I'd like to make a motion that would rectify that moving forward. I think that'll make it cleaner for us in the future. So I'm going to move that we provide a merit increase that would move the director to step 15. And then because that, doesn't result in very much of an increase, would offer that we provide a one-time contribution to his deferred comp account in the amount of $1,500.
I'll second that if I may, Chair.
Thank you. I think that's any discussion. I think that is a great proposal. And if I have any, okay, I get a call for vote. All those in favor of the motion as proposed by Director Janine Parisi, raise your hand or state aye. All right, looks like it's unanimous for the board members present. No, none opposed. Any opposed? Perfect. Motion is passed. Congratulations, Steve. Hang out with us for a little while longer, I guess.
Thank you very much, board.
Well, I hope you're pleased with that, Steve.
Yeah, got a thumbs up, and I really appreciate you, Steve. You're doing a good job. Okay, great. That was nice, quick and easy. Thank you, Janine. Item number 10, old business. Let's talk about the clean air scrubbers follow-up, please.
Yes, there were two items from the last board meeting that we need to follow up on. One of them was clean air scrubbers, and the other one, and the second one is the Beyond Toxics meeting that happened on June 8th. So the first one, board member Matt brought up about the clean air scrubber follow-up. So we looked in more into the Oregon Department of Human Services, Resilience and Emergency Management. They're offering grants to support emergency shelters with air scrubbers and other resources. That grant will purchase and deliver air scrubbers, as well as provide funding, consulting to public buildings and entities that intend to open their facilities as cleaner air shelters during wildfire smoke and other poor air quality events. So after we were made aware of this, we took the opportunity and reviewed the initial application survey, which requests that whoever applies, in this case, LRAPA, to provide the location of its public building to be used as a cleaner air shelter. It doesn't quite fit our situation, honestly, because LRAPA's only facility is its main office located on Main Street here in Springfield. And the space is not adequately really set up or staffed to operate as a clean air shelter or heating or cooling center like other places would be. So we did not complete the application survey due to the incompatibility with LRAPA's office and as a clean air cooling and warming shelter. We did notify, in addition to that effort, did notify Lane County's climate strategist, which I think that person's name is Cody Kleinsmith. And then the support opportunity that would be available there. I think we also talked to Mark Nystrom with the county. And then we also notified local partners in Oak Ridge, Grace and Sarah Ultimus Pope, and of this grant, and make sure they were aware of the opportunity. In all honesty, it would be also be difficult for LRAPA to actually store air scrubber units to be distributed later because you need pretty good space to be able to do that and be able to work around that. And then dissemination would be the other, slight obstacle to get them disseminated at the right time. So that's our report on that follow-up. Any questions before I go to the next one?
Yes.
I see. Joe does. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Please bear with me here. First, you're talking to the wrong people at the county. You should be talking to a gentleman named Steve Adams, who is on top of that division. Mr. Nystrom won't be with us much longer. That's number one. And number two, I just want to share with this body, I'm going to do this as succinctly as I can. There's an intersection here. There's a big move afoot at the state level I don't think they know what they're talking about, but to develop these big centers, somehow called resiliency centers for heat events, smoke events, cold weather events, natural disasters. And I've been pushing, I hope you don't disagree, very strongly for not creating these mega centers, but having community-based facilities that take existing buildings that the community identifies, be that a school cafeteria, a church basement, a VA or Grange Hall, and retrofit them to develop enough clean energy to power them, store energy for 60 days that can also supply, power food lockers, bathrooms, kitchens, and have them be community based. So what you're hearing here is an adjunct part of that. And to have the LRAPA building at Main Street to be one of those is an absurdity. So I just wanted to share that as a bit of background and agree with you not completing that application, Steve, and to encourage you to speak to higher levels at the county. Thank you.
Chair Joe, members of the board, I did speak to Steve Adams on June 30th, but it was slightly on a different topic because he's now in a different capacity at the county. And he did inform me that Mark Nystrom was actually leaving at the end. I think he leaves at the end of August for other adventures. But we did, I don't know exactly what it is, but he's not going to be around much longer. We did talk about the climate change work that Steve Adams is going to be part of and making sure it happens. And we are looking to try to deal with not only climate change work, but wildfire recovery and have some input not only on those efforts, but how we can work together on grant opportunities.
Yep.
That was the main thrust of that conversation, and it did occur. But while he's out, he may get me in touch with some other of his staff because he's taken a long break during the summer. And so maybe by August, I'll have someone else I can start those conversations in more detail.
So that we don't bore the board, Steve, could I request you give me a call after the meeting?
Certainly will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I was gonna tell you, Joe, I already fell asleep, but that was when the auditor was here.
Actually, I've been looking at your eyes, Janine, and you keep them open while sleeping very admirably.
It's pretty impressive. I remember one board member that didn't have that good a job. All right. So anyway, clean air scrubbers.
Yeah.
So do we diverse from that?
So I'll move on to the other follow-up item, which is the Beyond Toxics meeting that happened on June 8th. And basically the gist of that effort was we contacted a representative of Beyond Toxics about that June 7th or June 8th meeting. It was held virtually and it was intended to identify Springfield residents who have an interest in air quality topics or have air quality concerns. So Beyond Toxics has been working with an individual resident in Springfield who has continued health concerns related to international paper. So that individual is what the focus started out to be, and Beyond Toxics looking for, is there enough interest to have a special work group or an interested community group to talk about their concerns. I know that Beyond Toxics felt that that was a successful meeting, and we haven't heard anything as of late June whether or not there's another meeting planned. I do know that they have another meeting scheduled for the 19th of July, but it's focused on a facility in the city of Eugene. And we did talk to, I think the person we did talk to at Beyond Toxics was Argery Arbery Baribeau. That's who spoke with, or Travis did. And that's about the extent of that meeting.
All right. Well, thank you for that report. Appreciate you sharing that information with us. Unless there's anything more, we'll move on as noted information. We're moving on into new business. I know Matt, I thought, had some, and I do as well. So I'm going to go ahead and let Matt get out what he needs to say. And is there anybody else, raise your hand or holler or something if you have any new business. So Matt, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Yesterday, there was a press release that discussed the moving of air toxic monitoring piece from Amazon Park in Eugene to Oak Ridge. And I'll let staff forgive me for muddling through this as I'm trying to call up the actual press release. I'll let staff address this. I just want to, I have a few questions that revolve around our role as a board in regards to decisions like this. It caught me a little bit by surprise. A and B, I think the headline is buried in the press release. 4 paragraphs in, it indicates that there will be a long-term trend site that will remain in West Eugene, but LRAPA has determined that the second site, previously located in Amazon Park in Eugene, has the flexibility to be moved every couple of years to provide short-term air toxic data in areas of interest. And clearly, Oak Ridge is an area of interest. I would think that there would be funding for another air quality monitoring station rather than moving existing air quality monitoring stations. So I just wanted to open, Chair, with your permission, open the conversation about the press release, and I hope that all my colleagues got the press release about the air toxic monitoring in Oak Ridge that I'm alluding to.
Yes, and I'm just going to go ahead and jump in there. I'm pretty sure everybody else got it because I saw the email list. So, but Matt, that's I have on my topic was actually has some of that integrated with that. And so maybe we can kind of hold just for a little bit till I get through a little spiel I have that will could very easily address exactly what you're saying. You okay with doing that?
It's your meeting, Chair, so
Yeah.
let's hear what you got.
I'm trying to be nice, Okay, so yes, keep that thought in mind with what Matt was just saying, and I'm gonna go ahead and jump in on my new business. Anybody else have any new business besides this? All right, I'm gonna jump in with this, is that I'm going to propose that this board have a work session just based on how we're doing business, what approaches we want to make. Specifically, for example, the committee work, letting the committee know exactly what we want from them to give them, as Janine put it, some boundaries, some guidelines on where we want them to be. Something that is planned and very thoughtful. And secondly, this will give us an opportunity for where in the future for LRAPA, where we want to be as an organization, and where we want the director to be at some points down the road, some sort of check-ins, so that would benefit our current director and any future directors for, as part of the review process, so it's cleaner. And then also I would like to look at some policies, and I know operations is not really the forte of the board, but employee activity reflects on the board. And so like what you're saying, Matt, in regards to making this move with this equipment, to me is a significant thing that LRAPA is doing that's going to cause, or I don't know if it's going to cause alarm to the public, but it's certainly going to cause some interest in the media and with the public. And I anticipate potentially calls saying, why are you letting this happen? Why, what's going on? How come? And so here it is, the media is getting it today, I think. Travis, correct me wrong if I'm wrong.
Tomorrow morning, it's
Okay.
currently being translated.
Okay, so you have, less than 24 hours from now, the media is going to get it. I don't know what kind, and I don't think anybody here can predict what kind or how much of an impact that will make with the media, but it certainly has potential. And us being representatives of the public, they're typically going to call us, or some of us will be called, especially elected officials are going to be called saying, what's going on? And it's very difficult from our perspective, at least for me, to be able to answer in a logical manner and at least sound unable to sound unified, meaning the board in my mind should be unified with the staff and moving one direction as a whole, as opposed to us kind of maybe chasing or getting caught up. So Matt, is that kind of like what you're thinking as well?
Yeah, I think we're expressing similar concerns, Chair.
Yes.
But I do think that there's also two separate tracks.
Sure.
On the one hand, I think your approach to a work session could be really beneficial, especially if the board just, instead of meeting every month, every other month perhaps, was more of just an open conversation work session style approach. That being said, there's still an issue in front of us in which the media will have tomorrow. I have a lot of questions about it. I suspect my constituents will have questions about it. And similarly, I want to be able to answer appropriately. And to be very clear, I have a lot of reservations and heartburn just on the surface, getting that information shortly before this meeting, and wondering what our role can or should be in regards to such a decision. I don't think that it's appropriate for us to get into the weeds, of course, but this is not an insignificant decision, and I would like to know how to best address it. And I hope my concerns are alleviated, because on the surface, I have a lot of heartburn and a lot of questions.
Yes, I share those. I think others do. I think I know Mike's got his hand up. Howard, let's hear from you two guys and then go from there. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. I actually, Matt, I agree with you completely. This is a decision that should have come to this board. Unfortunately, Steve, you don't, have the history that we actually as a board set out to add the air toxics monitoring. I mean, that wasn't happening because we couldn't afford it. Our board deliberately set aside monies to make that happen. And so to change it without coming back to us, no, I mean, I totally know that you didn't know that, but that really is something that should have come back to this board if there was a change. I think, it actually makes sense. I think that if both of those sites were trending the same numbers and we're still getting the value from the one site, I think it makes sense to do some other, targeted sampling. So I'm not necessarily even against what we're doing. It should have come to us. We're the policy board. And I think we've crossed over from I would never want to tell you guys how to do your permitting, but at the same time, I think this is venturing over to the policy side. And that's where we certainly should be the ones that are weighing in on those sorts of things, especially if they're financial impacts. I assume that because we're just switching one to the other, that there aren't any financial impacts, but if they were, that would further compound my concerns.
Thank you, Mike. Go ahead, Howard.
Yeah, Joe, Joe P, I agree with, your thought about having a work session where we could discuss role of the board. I've been on this board now 2 years, and I don't ever recall as a board ever having that discussion about, what is appropriate for the board as far as any policies and things like that, and other than reading the bylaws. So I think that would be helpful. With respect to the relocation of the air toxics monitoring portion of the Amazon site, I saw the memo. I guess I was a little disappointed that we didn't get a heads up on that. And the other thing is, I think that the press release is very deficient in I believe, because there should have been some information in there about how valuable air toxics monitoring at Amazon is. There's no industrial sources there. I suspect most of the toxics that are monitored are from mobile vehicle emissions. And so it would have been helpful to at least discuss what the trends have been on air toxics monitoring at Amazon. I suspect that except for wildfire smoke events, that the amount of toxics detected there probably has been pretty stable. And I think the other thing that would have been helpful is to discuss the cost of monitoring air toxics. Matt, it's very expensive to set up an air toxics monitoring station, not only the equipment, but just the the analytical costs and labor costs of doing it. So it's not insignificant. And with limited resources, LRAPA could have, in that memo, just talk about that, and that, you know, there are limits to financial resources and staff resources, and just to provide more justification other than, well, it'd be interesting to see what's going on in Oak Ridge or see what's interesting going on in Springfield. I mean, hell, if we think that there is enough concern there, then, you know, it seems to me that the first thing would have been to start looking at what the cost would be to do some additional monitoring, and maybe not do a full suite of air toxics monitoring, but really focus on a few analytes that are probably known to be of particular importance that would likely occur in those areas. So anyway, again, I'm just disappointed that we just got a heads up about that last evening. And I guess it goes to another thing that's just been kind of on my mind, is that a lot of times before a board meeting, we're just getting information the night before, like the audit report. It came across at 5 o'clock last night. And so I didn't even really have much of a chance to review it. And this has been an issue on some other things too, like when we were discussing PERS, some of the information that staff developed, we only got a day or two before. So we as a board really didn't have sufficient time, I don't think, to really look at it. And so I'm kind of feeling like we're just getting information at the last minute or almost as an afterthought. And maybe that can be part of this workshop discussion about our expectations as to when we should be getting material, because I feel like we're getting it pretty late and not having an opportunity to really to read through it and think about it. I'm just not used to operating that way. And I think there certainly could be some improvement there.
Thank you, Howard. Janine, I'm gonna go with Janine first, Steve, and then I'll jump with you.
Thank you. I just want to concur with some of the concerns raised, and I think for me, living in South Eugene, and if neighbors were to ask me, I'd like to be able to have enough information to articulate the reasoning why we're doing that and feel good about it. So we are saying the same thing. I think we want to partner with the organization and be of one message. The thing that concerns me about it is, my soapbox about air pollution and toxics is that the public has a general rush to point to industry and forget that our activities, that we as individuals make a difference in air quality. So what kind of car you drive and how you idle and your wood stove usage in your neighborhood compounds impacts in South Eugene because it gets held up at the bottom of the valley. And that site was kind of helpful from that perspective because there's no industry, but the trends are about the similar as areas where there is industry. So I think it helps tell that story that individual decisions and behaviors makes a difference, and we need to all be responsible in thinking about the airshed that we share. So I'm disappointed from that perspective, but I can also see a value proposition of moving that station and trying to optimize the value that it provides. So I'm not in disagreement with the decision. I just don't have enough background to articulate it and support it. And I don't know that it's a policy decision that the board should have made, but I certainly feel like we should have been informed and had the ability to articulate that. So back to Joe's thought, I like the idea of having some open space for a work session. And Steve, I think this could be an opportunity for us to talk about how to better align the performance evaluation and the steps that we take and kind of feed them into a logical course so that you know what to expect, we know what to expect, and all the pieces come together in a timely fashion. It doesn't feel all haphazard. So I feel like we could weave that in. I like what Joe said about being more intentional about the work that we send to the Citizen Advisory Committee, so it doesn't just feel like haphazard and putting, concrete sideboards. And then there's been a number of just questions that have come up about, there might be an opportunity for us to hear from you about, hey, we decided to pull the the trigger on the HVAC remodel, but we're not gonna do the repaving because it's too expensive. So just, we don't have room for that in a normal meeting. So it just feels like there could be space for, so that these kinds of things have a space for discussion. And we don't bump up against these issues in the future again. So thank you for letting me ramble there.
Thank you, Janine. And to piggyback on what I was talking about and suggesting and going with what Matt was thinking about how many, et cetera, I'm thinking it may be appropriate to create a work session, but initially at first, like on the quarter of the year, every quarter year, as opposed to every other month, just to give it a jump start. And I think also gives us that room to, we can combine, all you got to do is compress some of this stuff in our regular meetings instead of dragging it out so much, but it allows us every quarter to take a breath, take a look, see where we're at, and do a recheck, reacquisition our target and pull the trigger. So, but anyway, if that sounds appropriate to you too, Matt, I would make that your opinion is important to me too. Joe, go ahead.
Work session, yes, vote. Whether it's once every quarter, once every 6 months, whenever it is, it's going to be more frequent than it has been in the last 3 years. So I appreciate that. As it relates to, and I know Steve was going to say something, so I'm sorry, Steve. I was kind of anxious to hear what you had to say, but since the chair called on me, I will say that I think that this air monitoring thing is just an example of poor team communication, really. For me, I don't know if it's policy or not, but I do know that this body has to have far more advanced notice. And I will agree also with Howard that, I mean, other people will have other ideas, but for me, it's like, give me everything the Friday before a board meeting, so I have the weekend to digest it and see if there are any questions, so that my questions are asked privately and not in an embarrassing way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joe. Wise input as usual. Okay.
So
Steve, go ahead.
So I've been trying to take notes here, Chair Joe, members of the board. These are all good comments, all good observations, things that have been in the back of my mind in the 16, 17 months that I've been here on what's been working and what needs to be maybe improved. And you hit on a lot of good things here in this 10, 12-minute conversation that we've had. So I apologize not for knowing the history of how precious air monitoring sites are to individuals and communities that seem to be nearby them versus ones that are far away from them, and what we're actually trying to accomplish. But I will tell you, even though the press release, Howard, was very brief, it had to be high level because that's what press releases are. The detail, we do have plenty of detail. We're willing to share some with you right now, depending on how much time you have, because I've got the experts here that can give you a 5-minute conversation in case you do get a phone call, or you can just direct them all to LRAPA, because there's a strategic reason why we did what we did, to move the redundant monitor, if you will, to another location. And you're right, resources comes into play, as well as staffing to do the work. Specific reasons we can share in any level of detail you want. I like the work group idea because we've been trying to put so many things on our agendas and no time for everybody to get the education and the background information that they need, especially when they're new board members. The orientation we do is high level at best, and it's not till you get into your second term that you actually understand everything that maybe you need to understand or feel comfortable to make the right decisions. The LRAPA business question I've always had in the back of my mind: what is LRAPA business and what should be the board's business? That seems to be a little bit of a boundary there that kind of goes back and forth every once in a while. And this is one topic that probably straddles both. And then the board agenda in general tends to be longer than it should. And we're trying to make sure we're being as efficient as we can. We've gotten multiple requests to have different times of the day board meetings. But if we can be more efficient with behind the scenes or work groups, more technical in nature, it would save some time on the board meetings. And I'll stop there.
Okay, well, thank you, Steve. That is helpful. And I think there's a strong desire to move forward with the creating a work session, putting that in queue. I'd like to see initially to put it up well, maybe let's wait till after the first one and see how often we want to meet afterwards. How's that sound? Matt, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. And Steve, thanks for the thoughtful response. I don't know if necessarily I need to hear from folks on the fly. But if there's just like a one pager that goes into a little more detail than what is expressed in the press release, I would find that helpful to digest and then respond appropriately.
Well, that makes complete sense, Matt. Thanks. Yeah, if you can put something with a little more detail together with your staff, Steve, and then just blast it out to us, and that'll just be helpful.
We can do that. I can assure you from a monitoring standpoint, we haven't lost anything by moving that air toxics monitor when it comes to Eugene.
Yeah, it didn't sound like it, but yeah, there's no way to tell it or to be able to explain it to people.
And Chair, since that press release is going out tomorrow, I hate to ask this of staff, but it would be most welcome to have that prior to that hitting, in case we do get a call. If they have the capacity, great. Even if it's just, a handful of bullet points, it does not need to be War and Peace.
We can do that, and at the bottom of it will be, call us if you need help, because we're the experts.
Right. Thank you.
Sounds good. As soon as practical, I think is what he's saying. So, Joe, go ahead.
This is a quickie, Chair. Why can't you delay sending the press release out by a day or two so we have that?
That works too.
We can do that.
Yeah, gosh, look at that wisdom flowing through.
I know, I'm on a roll.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Look at the flow.
Thank you, Councilor.
Steve, yeah, great idea, Matt. If you can, and Travis, let that out to the media, if you would, after we get that information, so we are prepared, which is what caught us by surprise in the first place, to be able to not be able to be prepared. So that'll help mitigate a lot of angst, I'm sure.
We can certainly do that. Just so you know, the monitor's already been moved.
Yeah. Well, okay. It is what it is. And I noticed on that thing that you're looking for places in Springfield instead of on top of our city hall. I've got some ideas, so we can talk. Okay, so anybody else want to impart anything else? All right. For the greater good, I'm going to adjourn this very, very.
Don't do it.
I think it was a great meeting. So, all right. Thank you. Everybody have themselves a wonderful day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.